Hey, everybody, this is John Bell. Welcome back to Eat the Oligarchy. Listen, today I want to dive into a story that should frankly scare the shit out of anybody who cares about the First Amendment and loves our democracy. It's being covered now. It was unfortunately being very lightly covered initially. It's starting to gain some traction even in corporate media, which is a good thing. But we need to amplify this because it's literally, well, along with the ICE Gestapo, it is the most un-American thing that the Trump fascist administration has been doing. And what I'm referring to specifically is the National Security Presidential Memorandum 6, also known as NSPM 6, which is titled Countering Domestic Terrorism and Organized Political Violence. Now, that title sounds kind of reasonable, right? Like, we don't want domestic terrorism. We don't want political violence. Who doesn't want to counter those terrible things? The problem is, as is the case with virtually everything these motherfuckers do, is that, and a number of civil liberties advocates and investigative journalists have pointed this out, is in a very broad and controversial way that this directive is being interpreted and implemented. Okay, the core of NSPM 6 is a new sweeping national strategy to quote unquote investigate, disrupt, and dismantle domestic terrorism. The problem is there has nothing to do with domestic terrorism. That is a fucking lie. What this is an attempt to go after their political enemies and to target them. It tasks the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force, the JTTFs, which were originally supposed to be focused on threats like Al Qaeda and ISIS. And you've noticed that some of these talking heads on the right and MAGA politicians are referring to people like you and me as being Al Qaeda or ISIS, and this joint task force is coordinating the domestic effort. And here's where it gets really sticky. The directive allows for investigations to cast a very wide net, targeting not just those who commit violence, but also the quote networks, entities, and organizations that foment political violence, unquote. It even seeks to go after the funders, officers, and employees of organizations who aid and abet the principal actors. This is scary stuff, folks. Crucially, the Attorney General is instructed to define what counts as a priority. And this is where the term anti-American behavior comes into play. Imagine that. So crucially, the Attorney General, who right now is Pam Bondi, who is a complete creature of the MAGA movement and is on board, they're the ones who are engaging in anti-American behavior because they're violating the First Amendment. They're tearing it to shreds. All right. So that's where this comes into play because the Attorney General is the one that's instructed to define what counts as a priority. All right. And I want to give credit. There's a journalist by the name of Glenn Klippenstein who is on Substack primarily, who has been very early in on this story. And it's a story that's being highlighted by Ken and Ken's reporting, which is really essential reading on this topic. And it's drawn alarm over the extremely vague criteria that this new strategy employs. The official NSPM 6 language has been criticized as being so broad that it can be used to label routine political dissent as terrorism. And I think that's an understatement. That is exactly what it's intended to do. It's intended to stifle your and my right to criticize the regime, to criticize things like capitalism, to criticize, anything like this. This is reminiscent of McCarthyism, really, and Joseph McCarthy and the attack on so-called communists, whether you happen to belong to the Communist Party of America or they just said you did, and then they hauled you before the Senate. Well, this is a shadow organization within the Department of Homeland Security, and there's literally a task force, an entire building that's been dedicated to this effort at this point, which is mind-boggling. All right. So, for example, while the directive focuses on acts like rioting and assault, its scope for what constitutes pre-terrorism indicators. Think about that. Pre-terrorism indicators includes things that sound suspiciously like protected political viewpoints and protected speech. And Klippenstein and other analysts have pointed to this language elsewhere in the administration's broader framework that expands terrorism indicators to include any behavior deemed, as I said before, anti-American. Well, what is that? How do you define that? Like, does it mean I'm anti-American if I criticize this administration or this what I call a fascist regime, this budding dictatorship? Also, the word anti-capitalist. So, if you criticize the capitalist framework for our economy in any way, apparently you're on the precursor list for being a terrorist. Or if you're hostile toward quote unquote traditional American views on family. Wow. Think about that. Traditional, I mean, first of all, that's so broad as to being meaningless, which is what they want. They want to be able to, they want who is in the least critical of this regime and then go after them. And we'll get into that more in a minute. But in addition to anti-Americanism, anti-capitalism, anti-Christianity, so all of a sudden now we have a state religion. Well, I view the Constitution's view on that as being freedom of religion and freedom from religion. In this country, you don't have to belong to any specific religion, and there is separation of church and state. All right. And if you want to be a Christian, fine. If you want to be a Muslim, fine. You want to be a Buddhist, fine. You want to be a Wiccan, fine. Like, everybody has the right to determine their belief system about this. I happen to be an atheist, so obviously this scares the shit out of me because I bow down to no God, and I'm not interested in being targeted because I express my belief in this regard. Also, support for the overthrow of the United States government. Well, I don't believe in illegally overthrowing the United States government, but I sure as hell believe in defeating and ending this current administration's hold over the country as soon as possible, starting with the 2026 midterms. All right. Okay, let's go on through the list. Extremism on migration. What does that mean? If I say that I'm pro-immigration, am I an extremist? If I think that we should gladly accept the oppressed and the downtrodden, those looking for a better opportunity, and that I don't necessarily care where these people come from. I don't care what race they are. I don't care what their religion is. If they want to come and make a better life for themselves and their family, then there should be viable avenues for them to do that. And that makes me a radical. That puts me on a domestic terrorism list. Give me a fucking break, folks. This is outrageous. This is right along the definitional lines of both authoritarianism and fascism. Extremism on race. Like I just said, we can't love and embrace everybody regardless of their race and their background? Are you fucking kidding me? Black, brown, white, Asian, you name it. Whatever, wherever you came from, whatever language you speak, whatever your religion is, non-religion, why the fuck does this matter for anything? Really? And I'm sure those comments somehow make me an extremist on race for believing in the tenets of the civil rights struggle and the ensuing civil rights legislation, the amendments to the Constitution that deal with this. And I'm an extremist because I want all of us to live in a multiracial society that does not discriminate on that basis. And we're going back. These people don't want to just go back 50, 60 years. They want to go back 150 years. And so that's on the list too. Next, extremism on gender. Wow. Okay. Again, broad, could be interpreted in any way. What the fuck does gender have to do with domestic terrorism? I see no logical connection there. The next one, hostility towards those who hold traditional American views on family. Look, hold your views. That's one thing. But I am hostile to those who would seek to impose those traditional views on everyone else. We live in the 21st century, folks, and what's happening here? Well, why are we going back in this time warp? And what does that mean? I can't be hostile to trad wives because they really fucking creep me out, to be honest with you. And I say fuck trad wives. I'm hostile towards you. How about that? Hostile towards those who hold traditional American views on religion. I think we covered that, but apparently they wanted to repeat that because I guess if you're not down with a white supremacist Christian theocracy, then I'm hostile. You're fucking right, I'm hostile to that. I want no part of it. If you think I want to live in Gilead as described in The Handmaid's Tale, you've got another thing coming, you fucking crazy bastards. So I think that makes me hostile. I'm definitely I think I'm hitting everything on the list here. Hostility towards those who hold traditional American views on morality. Wow. First of all, let's be clear. MAGA is the one that's hostile toward morality. We could have a long philosophical conversation about this, but there's nothing moral about fascism. There's nothing moral about taking away people's rights, their civil rights, the rights of women to control their own bodies and their own health care. All of these things that we've seen under attack since, MAGA took power, really since 2016. Obviously, this has been a long time coming. Conservative fascist movement has been steadily working on this project for decades. This is just the culmination. This is literally tangible stuff here. This is a group within Homeland Security that has been tasked to identify individuals and groups with these characteristics, all of which are protected as free speech under the First Amendment. Every single bit of this, and elsewhere in the Constitution. So let's be clear, expressing views that are anti-capitalist, advocating for LGBTQ rights, or simply being sharply critical of U.S. foreign policy, that is all protected speech under the First Amendment. If you're not scared yet, let's keep going. So why this creates such a chilling effect? The major legal and constitutional concern here is the so-called chilling effect that this directive could have on Americans' right to free speech and association, because it's intended to intimidate you and me. It's intended to intimidate progressive organizations and organizations whose mission is to protect our rights, to protect against government abuse, to support your and my right to vote, to organize, to protest. So when the government declares that it's going to investigate the funders and organizations behind anti-American sentiment, it sends a clear message. Criticize this administration or the system too loudly, and you will face the scrutiny of a terrorism task force, the IRS, and the Treasury Department, which is tasked with disrupting financial networks. I'm sorry, it just leaves me breathless. It essentially gives federal agencies a massive mandate to monitor, investigate, and potentially suppress legitimate political organizing and dissent, particularly against groups that the current administration views as political opposition. This isn't just about actual violence. That's not the point, and that's actually not what's been happening. There's very little of that, even now in this fraught time. It's about weaponizing the powerful tools of counterterrorism, weaponizing this government, this regime against the people who have every right to engage in political speech, absolutely at the heart of the First Amendment. This directive doesn't necessarily create new laws. In fact, it doesn't. But it instructs law enforcement to use their existing powers aggressively. And those powers were expanded during the war on terror, which was initially intended, obviously, to deal with the terror threats following 9/11. And that was a long time ago, haven't really been updated. They are substantial powers, but they were always intended to deal with external threats. So that changes the entire priority set to focus on and essentially criminalize politically hostile viewpoints. I tell you, the takeaway is this, everybody. We need to be vigilant about how the government defines domestic terrorism. And frankly, we need to protest this entire directive. It needs to, the powers that be need to immediately file lawsuits and try to get this stopped dead in its tracks, because it is dangerous. This is one of the pillars of this administration's plan to squelch and to criminalize all opposition and to cement their complete takeover of the government. We're going through a coup right now, and this is a big piece of it. If you couple this with the mass jackbooted thugs of ICE and the other law enforcement and military groups that are the administration is attempting to leverage against the American people. I mean, my God, folks, they've essentially declared war against American cities. They're dragging people out of their cars, out of their houses. They're breaking down doors with no warrants, no probable cause. Doesn't matter if you're a citizen, doesn't matter if you're a green card holder. If you're black, brown, they detect an accent. Our rogue Supreme Court has given them the green light to drag you by your hair, throw you to the ground, beat you, and throw you into a cell and potentially deport you to a third party country, to a foreign gulag somewhere. And this is not America. All right. So defining us or defining any of these activities, defining any of these beliefs in any way, characterizing them as domestic terrorism is wrong. It's bullshit. It's frightening. It's unconstitutional. You can learn even more about this by listening to Ken Klippenstein's work on the subject, Are You on the FBI's New Watch List, with Ken Klippenstein on Substack. Listen, this video is relevant. His video is relevant because it features an interview with investigative journalist. So look, in closing, I wanted to talk about this. I wanted to share my views about how dangerous this is. And I think there are a lot of things this administration right now that they're doing that should concern anyone who cares about democracy and living in a peaceful, decent society and country with the rule of law. This is a dagger to the heart of the rule of law. And these abuses are the terror, right? So let's call attention to this. This weekend, it's going to be October 18th, and you have the opportunity. I have the opportunity. I'm going to a No Kings protest. I'm going to kind of, I guess, the epicenter. I'm going to go to downtown DC, and I'm going to flip them the fucking middle finger, and I'm going to exercise my right, and I'm protesting all of this. And I hope you do too. You're not going to be alone. There are millions of us, millions and millions. I'm excited to see how many people come out this time. But folks, we gotta pay attention. And I know this stuff is really, really scary. It really frightens me as well. But now's the time to be engaged. Now's the time to push back. It is probably the most fundamental way, along with voting. We have to organize. We have to oppose this fascist takeover of our government. Look, folks, we are in the midst of a fascist coup. There's no doubt about it. And if we submit, then these people are never going to give up power and things are going to get a lot worse. So we got to stand up, we got to stand together, stay safe, be vigilant, and let's stand in solidarity for our rights and for all of our brothers and sisters' rights. This is the moment. All right, listen, I'm John Bell. This is Eat the Oligarchy. Whatever platform you're watching this on, please, I beg you, please hit subscribe. Trying to develop a following here, trying to obviously, the name is Eat the Oligarchy, and that the oligarchy was here before the Trump administration, and it's going to be here after the Trump administration, and it is the thing that is enabling the fascist movement to flourish and to take power. So we got to fight against it, and I need your help to do that. I need your support. So thank you very much. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk soon. Peace.